I just couldn't bear it. I just have such intense headaches and such fatigue that it just didn't work. I remember coming back in tears. If I did try and go out with a friend, I'd just come back, I'd be so overwhelmed and so unable to do anything, and I probably would have managed a little bit of conversation, and then I probably would have just sat there like really struggling and just been like, why did God bring us here for this to happen and for me to be able to do nothing?
Hi folks, welcome back to Raw Mission. Now, do you ever think that missionaries are super spiritual, somehow on a different level to other followers of Jesus? Well, one of the aims of this podcast is to break that myth. Those who go are no different to those who stay. We're flawed, we're sinful, we do things we're not proud of. Many of us actually see ourselves more like Jonah than the Apostle Paul. But we have tasted the goodness and grace of God in our own lives. We've seen the majesty and authority of King Jesus, and we're jealous for his name and his glory. And we've become aware of the need. 2 billion Muslims, the vast majority of whom have little or no access to the good news, and we can't look away. I'm Matt, your host, and joining me today are Stephen and Layla, young Brits who moved to the Arab-speaking world a few years ago to join one of our teams. But something really challenging happened to them in their first year that made life there even harder than they'd imagined.
Well, it's a real joy to have two good friends in the studio with me today. Welcome to Stephen and Layla. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah,
Thanks for having
us.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic because not only have you been workers on the field with us, but you've also been working on team with us here in the UK for the last, couple of years?
Yeah, we're coming up to 3 years soon.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
It's been great to have you here and doing lots of stuff with us at the home base. Let's hear a little bit about your upbringing. Are you both from the UK? How did you grow up? How did you get into global missions and so on? Let's start with you, Layla.
Yeah. So I am from the UK. I'm from a little island off the south coast of England and grew up in a Christian household and discovered God's heart for the nations, I would say, just through reading his word to begin with. When I realised how much God must love me, to save me, to redeem me, I just had a passion to share that with people so that they could know God's love and how great that is for them. And then reading the scriptures and seeing how that was totally all over the Bible, that really sparked my heart. And then I took as many short-term trips as I could through my teen years to explore that, especially with a heart for the poor and for injustice issues. And through that, basically got challenged by an older couple that I went on a church kind of partnership trip with to Africa, where they asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And I said, well, this really, but for forever.
Where were you in Africa back then?
We were in Uganda at that moment. Yeah. And so they said, well, what are you going to do at university? Because at that point I had a place to go to Exeter University to study philosophy and French. And so I told them that, and they were like, well, how's that going to get you here? And totally, the Lord could have used that, but it was the word that I needed in the moment. And then they told me about All Nations Christian College. And so I started to look into degrees there, continued to travel on my gap year, and decided that if the Lord opened a door to go there, that I would go there. And that's what happened.
Where were you on your gap year?
Oh, a bit all over. I went to Sri Lanka, I went to Hong Kong, I went to Australia and New Zealand, mostly just travelling.
Brilliant. Okay. And Stephen, what about your background? You also grew up in a Christian home, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm a pastor's kid, and sort of through that ended up with a cool connection probably when I was like year 5. How old's that? Like 10? And to go to Uganda as a family to support like a couple that my parents knew there. And so, yeah, we had like the chart to raise money on the wall for a little while, and then we went as a family, and I think that really opened my eyes. Weirdly, not the fact that there were so many people that needed the gospel, but that people from other cultures that have the gospel have so much to teach me about God. And I think going as a child and sort of going to all these different church services and youth camps and stuff was like, wow, like these Ugandans know so much about God, but in a different way than I do. And I think I came back just going, wow, like this has changed my whole perspective on God, and this is the God of the whole world. And also the people that don't know God, there's a new side of God to discover from them that I'll never get to know, and the church will never get to know unless they hear the gospel. But I came back from that, and I remember it must have been like a week, I turned to my mum and was like, Mum, I'm going back again. And she kind of jokingly said, sure, if you raise the money, then you can go yourself. So I did. I went again. I went by myself when I was 13. I flew out and met them in the airport. And I think in the time I thought I was like going to help in the orphanage again and be great. But actually it's probably just a annoying young teenager sort of thing getting in the way. But for me, just to be able to do that and having the doors opened again, like exposed me to that, like, no, it's true. Like the other side of the world, and there is so much more of the gospel here, and there's so much more to discover. I kind of followed on that. I had various ideas about, going back to Uganda and stuff. And then remember, I was chatting to my dad. I'd probably been talking about going back to Uganda for long term for a while. And my dad sat me down. He was like, "Did you know that there is like more Christian population density, I don't know what the right term is, but in Uganda than the UK? Have you ever thought about going somewhere they actually need you?" And it was really strong. It was a bit like a slap in the face, but it really did kind of open my eyes to that idea of unreached people groups. And like, yeah, no, there is this, but there's actually so much more to the world. And maybe God wants to use me in a strategic way, not just a way that's fun or a way that I'm known to it.
It's really interesting that your dad as a pastor said that, because a lot of pastors don't even think like that about the unreached. I thought you were going to say, oh, but there are so many people in the UK, therefore, why don't you stay here and don't go to Uganda?
Yeah.
But to take it to the next level and say, actually, there are places way more hard up gospel access-wise than Uganda. That's amazing that your dad was so releasing, so trusting, and so aware of what's going on in the world, actually. I didn't know you both had Uganda as part of your early connection.
It's random.
Yeah. We also actually went to Uganda. It's a bit later on in the story. We went to Uganda together.
As a dating couple,
as a very early couple as well. So it's like
nice.
Multiple steps in our journey.
That's great. Yeah, okay. So, let's go back to you, Layla. What happened? You went off to All Nations Christian College at that point then?
Yeah, which is where we met. And then through that time, honestly, I didn't really even know terminology like unreached people groups. I just knew that I wanted to share Jesus where there wasn't anybody. And so learn about all of those types of terms and learn about the world and the history of missions and missions really thoroughly through the Bible. And was really open about where I wanted to go. And so I was just asking the Lord, and then did some assignments on the Muslim world and just saw how few workers there were. I think at that point it was one worker to 750,000 unreached Muslims or something like that. Wow. So I was like, well, Lord, it seems strategic. If half the unreached people groups in the world are Muslim, then I guess I'll just go there. So that was how that decision was made. And then I took what's called a ministry trip. So I did 4 weeks in a Muslim nation to test that calling, which was a crazy experience.
Is that Africa?
No, it was Afghanistan, actually. A few years before everything re-kicked off, if you like. But yeah, so I really threw myself in the deep end. But it was an amazing experience, and I learned a lot from the workers that I stayed with. And
was this Frontiers Connected?
No, it wasn't actually. It was for a different organisation. Yeah. So yeah, that was amazing. And I think afterwards All Nations said they wouldn't ever be able to send somebody to a high-risk country again.
You were the last person to go.
Okay, why? You've got to tell us some stories.
There wasn't necessarily a why. They just realised we probably can't actually do that, and that's
Didn't
okay.
think that through too well.
But no, it was good. It was like when I landed, they were like, this is what you have to do if you hear gunshots and things like that. And then totally freaked myself out one evening because there was an oil barrel that cooled outside our accommodation, and as it cooled, it popped. And so there's me panicking, thinking this is what's happening and no one else is reacting. But no, I learned a lot through that trip of actually how I might think that I want to go off and do all these crazy things for God and I'm going to lay down my life in certain ways, but actually he has a calling to us to live for him. And how am I going to let him be Lord of my life and steward my life for his kingdom rather than just rush into what I see as the most needy, risky situations? How can I be wise? So yeah, that was really pivotal for me.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so you were already exploring the Muslim world, and had Stephen come into the picture yet at all, dating-wise? Do you want to pick up the story, Stephen?
Yeah, so I also came to All Nations. I think I came in off the back of this, okay, not Uganda, but definitely missions and definitely global something. So what would that end up as? I felt at the time like I really knew what that was, but looking back, I definitely didn't. And I think, to be honest, I think God did a lot in our sort of class, if you like, or our year for working with Muslims. I think not that many came in thinking that they were going to go to Muslims. Maybe there was like one key couple I can think of who were really convicted. But just through that time, there was a lot of special prayer events and stuff like that really seemed to bring people in the line of, no, we need to see something change in the Muslim world. And I remember really clearly hearing this guy talking about the stats, which people might have heard of, the massive difference in the amount of people coming to faith in the Muslim world now compared to ever before in history, and how dramatic a difference it's been. And that really got me excited as to like, where's God's momentum? Like, this is God's mission, not ours. And again, that's a focus at All Nations. Like, how do we take part in God's mission, what he's doing? And so if he's doing something in the Muslim world, I want to be where he's doing stuff. Like, I want to be involved in that. And that paired with Layla's interest in the Muslim world and the people who would become our team leaders' invitation to join them, those three things.
Because they were at All Nations.
Yeah. It's kind of what tipped the balance over to go to the Muslim world. Yeah, for me at least.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a bit of Uganda in both your stories. There's Afghanistan in Layla's story. And what about you? Had you ever done other stuff outside of, where you ended up?
No, honestly, I hadn't. My internship ended up being in Europe, which was less exciting, but still learned a lot. But yeah, so my actual first ever experience of a Muslim country was the day that we moved, because we never did a vision trip because we're affected by COVID and stuff like that. So yeah, for me, that landing day.
Neither of us had ever been to the country that we moved to until we
took our suitcases.
Until we landed.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, we do usually recommend people get a chance to go out and see and meet the team and so on. But at least you'd been at college with your team leaders.
Yeah.
So you knew them. That was quite a big part of you choosing that part of the Arab world, wasn't it?
Definitely. Yeah, and to begin with, they actually just said, come along and discover the Muslim world, discover the Arab world. We don't mind how long you're with us. We're happy for you to just use this as a training space. And we got on with them great. And I think because we moved straight after uni, so we were 22. I was 23. You had your 23rd birthday the first week we landed. We'd been married 9 months. So especially for our church, they were a lot more comforted by the fact that we were going to this couple that could shepherd us. They'd been in the country for a few decades. They trusted that couple, and that couple was very open-handed and pastoral towards us. And I think if it had been a different situation, then we wouldn't have been able to...
We'd have been asked to wait, for sure. I think, to be honest as well, like, that's like the bit that we've almost just missed out is so we finished uni, we really knew that we wanted to go, and we kind of felt drawn to this team and this couple, but we just didn't think we could go straight away. We didn't think we had the skills, we didn't think we were able. But what changed, I had a PGC course.
PGC is teacher training, for those who don't know. Yes.
So I was like all set up on that, and then I remember we had a call with our like future team leaders, and they kind of were like, yeah, you could use teaching here, but I can't remember exactly how, but they just challenged us and like, why don't you come and find out what you want to do and find out what actually would work for you here, what you'd enjoy, what you feel like would work along with ministry. And something about that really clicked with us, and we just felt really challenged. Like, yeah, what are we, like, if we do this, right, so I'm going to do a year of training, and then I've got to do 2 more years of an ECT, and so we're here for 3 years. So just like you to do 2 more years to solidify it. I'm like, we're just going to get stuck here, and we're not going to know what we want to do. Whereas this opportunity is here in front of us right now. We just felt really challenged by God that we needed to do that, and that we could, if we did some time and went, right, I want to get training in this particular area. We can go back to the UK and we could get that, or we could do it there, but we'd be in the place where we felt like God was calling us to be.
And not every country in the Arab world or worldwide does give you that freedom of, well, just come and see and learn language and so on. But if that was an option for you, why not grab it? And you did.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think when we just knew that we felt called into mission, it's like, well, we'll do anything. Like, we'll do whatever the profession is that we need to be there. So we're not attached to that. The bit we're attached to is actually serving God overseas at mission. So let's go and do that bit, and the next bit can be an add-on rather than the other way around, rather than getting the training and letting the mission be an add-on. To make the mission the full focus, especially in our youth, I think that works well for our position.
Yeah. So paint a picture. What is it like arriving in that Arab city that you ended up living in for a while? Yeah, first impressions. Tell us some stories.
Well, our city was a mega city, around 25 million people, pretty polluted, dusty, hot most of the time until you get used to it. Kind of claustrophobic in lots of ways. I grew up on a farm, and so it was very challenging for me to begin with, I think. But also there's just a life that you kind of fall in love with. There's a pulse. I think also we're both more late night people and more spontaneous people, and so the fact that the pulse didn't feel like a rat race, it felt like just a buzz. Buzz, like, and everything is slightly exotic to you and it's different, and you walk around and people are shouting at each other, and there's cars honking, and there's dust spraying in your face, and our feet were just mucky every single day we came home.
Doesn't matter how many pairs of socks.
Not even that. We wore sandals, and you can't wear shoes in the house, so we adjusted to taking them off as soon as you come home, and there would just be these brown footprints all over the tiles. But so it was crazy and overwhelming and super tiring, but we loved it.
An apartment block you lived in or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. More practically, when we originally landed, I remember, especially for me, not having been to like a country like this before, like we landed in this airport and it's just like, I mean, again, this was COVID time, so you had this massive line of people getting ready to show their COVID tests and whatever, but the line was just nothing, and every so often people would just walk through past the guys who were waiting, and yet there's also guys with guns there, like watching everyone, staring them out, but then also letting them walk past, and we just like, what are we supposed to do? Like, we got so lost in the airport.
Yeah, and we knew nothing. I remember texting our team leaders on the plane because we were doing a type of language learning that we would learn as we were there. So they told us, don't worry about that. And I remember texting as we got on the plane, I was like, I don't even know how to say hello to the immigration officer to be respectful. Like, how do we say hello? In some ways, totally unprepared. But it was exciting as well as absolutely terrifying.
And I do remember seeing Layla's face as we were sort of driving through with like half excitement, half terror as this city just went on and on and on. You know, it was like an hour and a half drive at least from the airport to where we lived, and that's all just through just city and city and city.
Blocks and blocks of buildings.
And mosques
Concrete.
everywhere, and was it a very clearly Muslim cityscape?
Even just from clothing, as much as it was extreme because we'd come from lockdown, but then to just be surrounded by people. And I think it is shocking, and you do realize, as much as it's hard to admit and it's like sad to admit, we have internal biases about what we think these people might do and what we think they might say, and like have we met them and we're here, and then you know it takes time, and when we arrive to like, I don't know how these people are going to treat us or what they think of us, and you have to shed that over time and really go, no, these people are deeply kind and deeply wonderful, and but when you first arrive you don't have that, and it's just like, oh my goodness, this is so overwhelming, and flashing lights and beeping horns and
I'd say the flashing lights was probably more intense than the mosques on every street, and there were churches as well, but they're just not lit up and advertised in the same way.
Tell us about some of the first Arabs you met then, or some of the relationships that stick in your minds.
I think I'll always remember there was like a little corner shop down the road, and I think I had someone affectionately call them a boss man shop, which like wouldn't translate very well outside the UK, maybe.
But like a little cigarette stall.
It's like
kiosk?
It's like everything you need.
Some of them just sell snacks, but then some of them you ask for it and they'll deep into a cupboard and they'll have everything. It was run by a family, and so you know, one night it would be the younger brother, the next night would be the older brother, then the next night it would be the dad, and we just got to know them and they would get to know us. And as we kind of went there and didn't understand how to pay our bills at the shop and didn't understand how to top up our mobile phones, and they kind of laugh at us and also not know how to help us all at the same time, I think just that, like, because a special relationship, and it seems like a lot of people seem to have that with their local shop like that, and some people got really welcomed in as family, but just generally they just recognize you, and I mean, they'll be dealing with another customer, but they will stop talking to the customer to greet you and say welcome and say hello, and that special feeling, knowing like, oh yeah, this place feels like my place, in a way that the UK suburb just never does.
That's true.
You never walk out. I mean, maybe you walk the dog and someone says hi, but not like that.
Because you're looking for familiarity and you're looking for belonging, and especially in a new place like that where you don't know anything. And that's nice, something regular, the people who are the same. And actually, familiarity, I mean, yes, family. It was a family. What about people around you in the tower block? Was it hard to get to know them?
I think it was harder than we expected, because probably part of our preconceptions and some of our previous experience, we really expected visiting culture to be strong. And I think in the city, it just wasn't as strong as we expected. And that's partly because of this nation's history with just political unrest, not necessarily as trusting to invite people into their homes as we expected. But it is still, I guess, socially dictated that you'll go and greet your neighbours and that type of thing. So it was hit and miss, I would say. Yeah, but the people on the street, we definitely got to know the people that were around more regularly. Yeah, which came with its pros and cons. There was one particularly difficult story for me, as not long after we moved, especially with navigating male-female relationships with that, there was this one guy who would drive past our building, because there were a couple of other non-local families staying in the building. So it was known as a bit of a place that was safe for foreigners to live. So there was this one guy who would drive and then park his motorbike right outside our building, and then he would just shout at the building. But he would also very intensely stare, or he would say quite lewd and rude comments if you walked past as well towards the women. And this happened to me specifically a lot. So that was really difficult to adjust to when you're new in a place. It went on for probably about 2 months. And so we were trying to figure out, like, I'm in this new culture, I want to be respectful. I have no idea what he's actually saying. Right. I can get the vibe, but I'm not actually sure.
And is it mental health, or is it
exactly.
He's actually an aggressive person?
Yeah, what's happening? And then it got to the point where I would leave the house and he would start to follow me as well. Yeah. And so this is where, like, the gift of having good local friends is so important. Because eventually we asked a couple, didn't we?
Yeah, I was going to say just before that as well, like we were doing that paired with asking non-local advice first. And, you know, our teammates and what people are reflecting is like, oh, I need to show the light of Christ to this guy and just be kind, and just ignoring and just like letting go and praying that it would go, which not necessarily bad things, but actually the advice was a cultural advice, not necessarily like a godly wisdom advice. And I think we realised that properly when we did speak to this local couple, as they just said.
Yeah, because they were like, it's totally inappropriate and your husband needs to come out and kind of put him in his place, basically.
And shout at him.
Yeah, they said you stand on your balcony, because I would go out onto the balcony to water our plants, because I like accumulated as many houseplants as possible to have nature in the city. Yeah. And it just got to the point where I felt too uncomfortable to do that. And they said, every time you do that, your husband goes out with you, he stares at him, he locks eyes, and he says, what is it? If he says anything, if he looks at you. And that's when it stopped, actually.
Wow.
As well as we had like a prayer support chat for us from people back home that were like just praying for us regularly, and partners. And I remember putting it on there, and it was the following week as well that it went. So yeah, that was really dramatic.
That's really important. Thank you. That's good advice. Good for us to think about. It's pretty similar in Pakistan, actually. You have to protect one another very well, and especially the ladies, if you're out in a big, busy marketplace. And if anybody does something inappropriate, you call attention to it quickly. You yell, you shout, and the crowd will actually support you against that inappropriate behavior. And it seems a bit countercultural for us. Oh no, just be quiet and move away or whatever. But sometimes, and as a man as well, like you say, lock eyes. What? And they would say, don't you have a sister at home? Quite strongly, but that is the cultural language that they understand. That means you're not welcome to do that kind of behavior. And I'm protecting. So back off. And it almost always that will deal with it. But it's really good you got that wisdom at the right moment when people were praying. And
definitely.
Scary though. I mean, I don't want to underestimate how
it just changes the way you feel welcomed into it. It's the combination. You have that local shop who welcome you every time, paired with another person who is the complete opposite, and that is the tension.
And you feel more vulnerable because you're in a new place. You just don't know the cultural norms.
And you don't know what he's saying, especially I think in that place where I don't just represent myself, I represent my husband, and then we know as well that we're ambassadors for the faith, so I represent God in that place. And what am I allowing to be said over me that's actually really inappropriate, which is definitely different to how our mindset would be. But it was important that I would be seen to be respected in that place for our family, and then also for our faith.
Fascinating. And what was the dress code for you guys? Male and female might be different. What was it like there?
Yeah, I think male, it was fairly simple to just focus on wearing trousers, which was a struggle for me at the time, to be honest. I used to wear shorts everywhere all the time.
And it's so hot, you think, even more so wearing shorts and flip-flops now.
What do you mean I can't wear shorts? But just trousers for me. I think it was more simple for me.
So the city that we were in, it differed a lot depending on how conservative people were in their faith, but also how wealthy they were. So a couple of decades ago, it would have been really rare for people to cover their head at all, or for the women, they'd wear maybe tighter things or skirts and things like that. And then that's changed over the past couple of decades quite rapidly to be more conservative now. And so you'll see, especially like, for example, women who would beg, they'd be like very conservatively dressed. But then later on, when I trained in some work and I met some wealthier local families, she would wear quite similar to Western clothing. She'd never cover her hair. So it really varied. So honestly, pitching yourself in that is quite difficult. And you have to think about, who am I trying to be like? So if I'm looking to remove barriers to the gospel, who am I trying to be like? And therefore, who am I trying to dress similarly to? And to be honest, because we came so open-handed, at the beginning, I didn't really know, and that was quite difficult. It was quite stressful.
Yeah. No, I remember making a really clear mistake where I'd come with assumptions that, not wearing a headdress and that attire that you'd imagine, it must be a Christian because there is a Christian population. And I spoke to a woman at like a sports club that I was going to, and I literally asked her about church or something like that. It was appropriate to talk to her in that situation. And she just looked at me like I was crazy. And was like, no, I'm a Muslim. And I was like, oh, right, okay. Just that one of those simple mistakes and just that assumption. But yeah, she was from a wealthier family and her father didn't instruct her that she had to do that. So she was free to.
Yeah. So for me, I would wear long sleeves, obviously long trousers. I tried to get tops or cardigans and things that would like fall quite low.
So you can wear trousers there, as a woman.
Lots of people would wear trousers. There's also a difference, I think, which I guess was slightly unique for us, where we went out married but without children, which is not very common in the culture. Before you're married, you might be able to dress a bit more young, and then when you're married, you might become a bit more, I don't know, mumsy and slightly more conservative. But then again, it very much depends on your husband's preferences then.
Yeah. And when you don't have kids, you kind of fall in between those two things. You're kind of not a mum with kids, but you're also not single. So yeah.
And then always hair up, but I didn't cover my hair. But our team was focused on also leaving our city and going to these more remote groups on the borders of our country, and so for those places I would often cover my head.
Right. Yeah, so the important lesson really is be flexible, be fluid, and absolutely the same where I was. When at one point in the university I taught in had a female vice chancellor. You know, she'd hello Mr. Matthew and hold out her hand to greet me with a handshake.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to shake that hand then, but that in most parts of Pakistan I would never shake the hand of a woman, let alone even make eye contact really for any long moment. So it really does depend, doesn't it? City and rural and university and street, and everything just changes, and you eventually pick it up naturally, don't you? But in the beginning it's like, what is happening? What do I do?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think in the city that we were, where there were other people that were from Western nations that just had jobs, say, as diplomats or things like that.
Teachers.
The challenge is to not just go, I can get away with living a similar lifestyle. So where I feel uncomfortable and out of my depth, I'm just going to revert to that. And so the challenge is to stay matching the groups in that city that are harder to be present with.
Because we want to be known as modest, as people of faith, spiritually conspicuous, we sometimes say, not religiously obnoxious, not in your face with religion, but sensitive and honouring to family, culture, God, and so on, in a gentle way.
Yeah, and clothes and appearance really do communicate that to people, especially I think to Muslims. We don't really think about it as much as Christians. We do, but nowhere near as much as they would. And when they can't see any way that you are honouring God in that way, then are you actually
when there's already assumptions based off of your skin colour or the country that you say you're from, or
How did first conversations go? What are you doing here? Why are you coming to live in the Arab world? What's your identity here? How did you manage all of that?
I think I'd said different things to different people and then found myself like crumbling my boots when those people might be in the same space as to like, am I here to work with refugees, or am I here to work for language, or am I here to honour Jesus, or like what does that look like? I think especially in the beginning I was just like, I don't know the right thing to say, and I think that eventually honed into something which was probably more like, I feel like God's really challenged me to come here and to honour your culture and learn your culture, and also help out with refugees and be willing to do what God wants me to do, would be kind of the more standard answer I landed on.
Or if it was a quick conversation, we'd say we're here to learn Arabic, because that was very common in our city as well, and that is what we spent,
and it was true,
like 20 hours a week or something doing. So
yeah, that's good. And did you find people were pretty interested in you as well as generally welcoming? Would they ask faith conversations?
Sometimes.
I think it was a real mix. And again, I think our city had some really clear, almost like class areas, and then different people had different questions. So One of the key ways that I met local people was joining a sports club. The people who would be in the sports club are more in that middle kind of upper class type of area, which at the time, I think originally I was like, oh, these are not the right people. And then I realized, hang on a second, yes, they are. They're Muslims and they don't know Jesus, so they're worth that time. But they were quite used to the idea of Westerners and they watched a lot of American or British shows. They just didn't really ask anything about why I'm over here, because I think even some of them could probably imagine traveling to other countries and stuff. So they'd be much more interested in either like pop culture references or stuff like that, chatting about those type of things. Whereas I would say kind of poorer families that we met had more genuine curiosity as to why we would be there, especially if we would go and visit them in where they lived. They're not like the glamorous parts of town, and they would be a lot more inquisitive, maybe lead more to faith conversations.
Less imaginable for them, I think, which led to more questions.
And because there are Christians in their culture, did you feel most Muslims assume I know what Christianity is, I know who Christians are, so they're not quite as inquisitive?
Have you ever thought about your role in God's great mission to draw all people to himself? There are so many ways you could get involved, even if you don't end up overseas. You could share some of these episodes with a friend, introduce Raw Mission to your church, give us a 5-star rating, or write us a review. You could also become a regular partner in this ministry, perhaps by giving £10 or £20 a month, enabling us to keep growing our team here and sending more labourers to the harvest field. You could even join our team in the UK. We're often on the lookout for new staff, for advocates and mobilisers around the country, or for those of you with finance and administration gifts who could work with us here in the office. Do pray about that. Thanks, guys. And now let's rejoin the interview.
Yeah, I think so. And for me, that kind of led to a little bit of like, actually, if someone asked me if I was a Christian, I'd usually say no. And then they'd ask, oh, are you a Muslim then? And then you say no. And then they're really interested.
Yeah.
Like, so what are you? And I would kind of go and give like the answer of like, I'm a follower of Jesus or like of Isa. And that was a way to get there, because as you say, when they feel like they know what Christians are, if you say, oh, yes, I'm a Christian, that's the end of the conversation, because they go, bang, okay, I know what that means.
And it might be wrong. What
yes,
they think they know.
Almost definitely it's wrong, to be honest, especially, it's very different, and the Christians that they might know. And so I think that ended up, but it took a while to get to that point of going, oh yeah, I'm trying to say different things to be conspicuous about who I am.
And provoke
thought. Yeah,
rather
provoke thought rather than just tick the box that they want. So,
yeah.
Really interesting. It sounds like a fascinating place. What were some of the hardest things for you guys?
Yeah, I think probably the big thing that overlooks a lot of our time that made it difficult was after maybe 4 or 5 months of being in the country.
I think less, 3.
Yeah. We actually had an amazing Eid dinner with a local family. It really felt like we were getting into our time, and it was like a turning point of like, wow, we understand in a new way and our language is deepening. And then we went to another city in the country to get out of our city, which was like stupidly hot, and it's like everyone tries to get out around that time. So we went to this other city and we're just walking around on the street, and
it was Eid, so it was packed because lots of people from more rural parts of the country came to this city for that weekend. It's like a bank holiday weekend, basically.
Yeah. And we were just walking down the street and somebody leant out of a tram and just whacked me on the back of the head. And it was a really weird moment for me because I didn't fall over and like it hurt, but nothing dramatic happened. I was mostly shocked and turned around, looked back at the tram to see the guy kind of looking back, kind of laughing, and carried on with that evening. Gradually kind of felt a little bit woozy and a bit funny. But the big change was the next morning. I woke up the next morning. We went out and I did not feel well.
We went to church.
On the way back from church, I just felt really woozy. Everything shook. I could barely start to walk. I had such a crazy headache, and I got back to the apartment where we were staying, and then for the rest of the day, I couldn't walk into the next room without going along the wall, and we ended up getting a car back to our apartment, and that kind of level of needing to be in bed, really bad headaches, needing to walk along the wall was about a week and a half probably of that, and it just seemed to last forever.
Did you see a doctor that first week?
Yeah, so they were particularly worried about a part of my neck that might have been injured. They decided that it was probably okay and it would just be concussion and that it would go away.
Had a CT scan.
I had a CT scan, like there was no major damage.
Oh no, actually the CT scan was later. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they did a physical assessment, decided 95% probably fine, probably just a concussion, we'll get over it in maybe a month or two. 5% we could pay because there's no National Health Service or anything like that. So we could pay to get an MRI, but we said, well, if the doctor only thinks it's 5%, then it's probably fine and we'll leave it. And then Stephen continued to be unwell for probably that level of concussion for about 3 months. And it was hot. It was the height of summer then. We'd been there, 3 to 6 months through that period. So it was really the kind of culture shock ebbs and flows. So we would come off on the high, really, is when it happened, and then it just made the next shock really low through the hot summer. So it was a bit of an accumulation of difficult circumstances that first summer.
You couldn't function, you couldn't do language study, you couldn't...
Everything. And especially
halted.
after that key moment, it felt like everything had gone, wow. And you do, with the culture, you hit those catastrophes, but you also hit those shoot moments where you go, wow, like, I can do this, I can live here, I can love these people, I can have friends. And it was right after that, and it's like, boom. It took all the wind out of your sails type of thing. And I also had some other more common issues, like stomach issues and stuff like that. But those things just build, and it, like you say, just restricted everything we can do. So like clubs that I was attending, a refugee group I was helping out at, language lessons, even team events. And personally, like, I'm a massive extrovert, and so everything just shut down for me, and it just felt like life didn't exist outside of our apartment. And it's not like home. You don't have the comfort foods, and the Wi-Fi's not good, and it's sitting and sweating in a
I remember
apartment.
reading a list on like a health website of like what to avoid if you have concussion. It was like loud noises, high temperatures. I was like, should we leave the country? Yeah, so that was really tricky. And then there were still things to sort out around the house. We'd only been there 3 months, as well as the normal running of our lives and trying to keep my language lessons going, and Stephen being quite unwell. And so suddenly I was doing quite a lot quite early on. So that was a challenge.
Yeah.
And then you slightly improved, and that continued for about a year until we went back to the doctor and said, this is still not gone.
Yeah. Which started a whole other set of investigations. But again, it's just that pressure on everything, or like missed language lessons, or it's really important to get all those hours in early as you can and push into it, but missing so many of them and falling behind Layla and her language. So when we do go out, just not feeling like we were at the same level, even though we'd started all at the same time, and that just being demoralizing. And again, just restricting, like, you want to go and enjoy the late night culture and you feel attuned to that, but when you actually do it, I just couldn't bear it. I just have such intense headaches and such fatigue that it just didn't work. I remember coming back in tears. If I did try and go out with a friend and I'd just come back, I'd be so overwhelmed and so unable to do anything, and I probably would have managed a little bit of conversation, and then I probably would have just sat there like really struggling and just been like, why did God bring us here for this to happen and for me to be able to do nothing? Like, these people support us to be here to do God's work, and every time I go out and try, I just come back and it feels like I've achieved nothing. And I think especially that first year before we went back to the doctor, God really did teach me a lot. Like, I remember coming back on home assignment and talking to people, and I felt like God gave me kind of just an idea around like being God's camera crew, because we had still seen God do amazing things, whether it's through people around us or whether it's through answers to prayer. It was like, you know, if I am just here, and if, you know, this support raise money is to get me here just to witness to what God is doing himself, with me being literally the worst version of myself I've ever been, then that's worth it if that's what he's chosen to do. And I remember feeling so challenged about that coming back. I will go and I will be your camera crew, God. Like, I will just sit behind the camera and I'll just watch what you're doing amongst these people and the way you want to change this country. But it was a really big wrestle to get to that point, because just a lot of dissatisfaction essentially. And
we want people to thrive on the field, not just survive, whether that's in team life, whether that's in culture, or whatever it is, of course in ministry. So what happens when someone's not thriving? And that's a huge question all the time that our member carers are asking and trying to encourage people with. Did you feel you had church at home and member carers supporting you through this?
I'd say at different points, different levels of yes. Like, there were points where support was brilliant and we made great relationships through those difficult times. And I mean, actually, there was a lady on our team as well who had ME, and she'd been on the field for like 10 years with ME, and so
in her 50s, and had ME since she was 18. So really well accustomed to serving God overseas when you feel limited. And that was really inspiring and helpful for us.
Just that you can carry on with this, and efficiency is actually not a big word in the kingdom of God the way that we think it is. Like its godly efficiency was just unseen by us, and from the outside we could see how effective and amazing she was, despite knowing, as we got to know her more and more, how restricted she was, and going, okay, well, I can see that in her. So what is God doing in me? What does he want to do in me and us? Because as Layla said earlier, like my restriction is her restriction.
Yeah.
Like we can't share the cooking, definitely, and we can't like going to do the groceries for me, just not possible some days.
Just do ministry together and be out with families.
Yeah,
it's
just harder and harder.
And going back to that support thing, I mean, what does support look like? Even if your team is great, your church is great, over there and here, and member care is great, you're still going to be wrestling, you're going to be lonely. Humans can't help at a lot of the time when people are going through deep crises. It's just limits to what we can offer, I suppose, even if the intention is there. Some stuff you had to battle through.
And that was the challenge, taking it to the Lord in that, and understanding what on earth his purpose was, and coming to a place of acceptance and trying to find a sustainable lifestyle when everything is new and you already don't have a normal, with also grieving that with God. That was really challenging, really tricky. Yeah, and I think just, I don't know, stretched us in ways that we hadn't been stretched, I think, so far. And also just so confusing, like, Lord, what on earth? Like, we are in our early 20s, we're so willing, Lord, we'll just do it. Like, you know, that's already clear from what we've shared of choosing to go before, like, we've done certain other things that people might think would be helpful and stuff like that. Like, we've shown that we're so willing, Jesus. Like, why would you restrict us?
I think as well, like, it was interesting in that time, like, Layla was still doing language lessons and still making relationships despite me being more limited. And even as hard as it was also amazing to watch her have more and more opportunities to go and meet with women, and even just being out and about, that would cause you to have chance encounters, especially with women that you wouldn't have had it if I was there. And, you know, for me in that was like, eventually came to the point of me going, okay, God, if we're supposed to be here so that Layla can be here and you can use her in amazing ways, then okay, God, I'll sit inside and I'll wait and I'll do language when I can and I'll see friends when I can. But
release her into ministry, and that's a
but that was really
couple.
Really hard.
Wow, powerful, guys. And you know, you're still young. This is only a few years that we're talking about. So
it's true.
Yeah, we're not expecting to wrap this all up with some neat, perfect answer, because this is still part of your formation and figuring out what the Lord is up to. So at this point, Layla, you're feeling a bit more released to go out and do some ministry on your own with some of the ladies in that culture. Give us an example of what that might have looked like.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of going into people's homes and just trying to weave Bible stories, offer prayer, but be real. And actually, Stephen being unwell in some ways gave me a common relatable point, especially if we were in poorer households. People might be bringing up what's going wrong in their lives or what's difficult. So that was in some ways really good to be able to share. Probably the most impactful visit I had that I can remember is going to one household with a teammate and visiting our friend there. She had 2 kids at the time and was pregnant with her 3rd, and her mum was also visiting, who came fairly regularly. And we were kind of praying for the baby, and this was something we did fairly regularly at that point, so they assumed their positions that they did when we prayed for this unborn child. And then later on in the conversation, the mum asked for advice for her cough that she'd had for a really long time, and kind of just forgot to think about it really, and we're like, oh, maybe try this, and then moved around. And then she brought the conversation back and said, aren't you going to pray for me? And so we were like, oh yeah, we should pray for you. So we did that. So hands open in front of us, which is more relatable for them, eyes open. We just asked that God would basically touch her. And in this time, my teammate paused for a bit longer than we maybe normally would when praying. And afterwards, she said, did anything happen? And this lady said, yes, I saw a vision, and it was a man in white, and also Mariam was standing. So Mariam is Mary. Mariam was standing behind him, which often Muslim women will see Mariam, or that will be part of their visions of Jesus. I think it's just God's kindness as a way to connect to them. At which point we were like, what? okay, what do we do? Maybe we just pray again because we don't know. And so we prayed again, and we just let more time pass without really words, but just to see if God did anything. Asked her again, and she said, yes, he told me something, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. And so we were like, oh, okay. And at which point we tried to just kind of tease it out, started to talk a little bit about Jesus, started to veer into places that we might disagree. And so we thought, okay. And my teammate just quite diplomatically said, I think something differently about Jesus, that he wasn't just a prophet, but it's okay, we don't need to argue about it. And they said, well, what do you think? And she was like, well, I believe that he was God. And then the mum pipes up and she said, that's what he said to me.
Wow.
And we're going crazy at this point, but trying to keep calm on the outside. Like, he told you that he was God? And then as she told us more about the story, it was basically an exact verse from Revelation as well, of like, I'm standing at the door of your heart knocking. And yeah, we were just blown away by God's grace in that moment.
You found the verse as well, right?
Yeah, found the verse. My teammate read it and she was like, yeah, that's exactly it. And then continued to pray for her. And my teammate especially shared quite a lot with her on other visits and would go, especially when she was visiting. And to be honest, that was the most that seems to have happened on her spiritual journey. So not really sure what God is doing in the background, but so incredible to witness that.
Wow, so good. But let's move forward in the story a bit and see what happened next as things developed.
Yeah, so I ended up probably after about a year and a half of being there, nearly getting to a point with our language learning where I could be a bit more free with my time. So because the visiting culture hadn't been as easy as I expected, I decided to get trained as a doula, which is an emotional and informational support person for women as they go through birth, or often leads antenatal classes and things like that. So not medically trained, but somebody who's there to support as a way to try and meet women and trying to be a blessing in those pivotal moments in life. So that was really amazing. It was great to stretch my brain in a different way as well, and actually do some learning that felt like you were accomplishing and getting past the learning curve rather than the never-ending transition of life overseas and more to learn. So that was amazing, and I really enjoyed being at the few births that I got to be at and meeting women in that way as well and supporting them, and also being able to bring Jesus into those moments. Yeah, that was really powerful and really rewarding.
And your team had quite a culture of prayer as well, didn't it? That was a big part of the ministry out there.
Yeah, definitely. So we would meet together 5 days a week for prayer for an hour and a half in the mornings, and we would pray over mostly these different places in the country that we were focused on, but also for the country in general or for each other or different things like that. So it was really great to be postured in that way. It really felt like God was leading our strategy. So we were joining with what God was doing, and we were discovering that in prayer. And so encouraging, because we joined probably a year after the team was formed. And so it was still very much early days in terms of this pioneering vision for the team. And now we still keep up with them. They're 5 years in or something like that. And the transformation that has happened in those places and the doors that have been opened only through prayer is just incredible. It's really amazing. And now, because of that, they have relationships, because these were places where there's very few contacts, there's no believers. So you go in and you think, how on earth, Lord, are we going to see something happen here? And now there are open doors with which to share Jesus from, and in a few places people who have come to know Jesus. So that's really, really encouraging.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, I think we sometimes forget that pioneering places, there's just so much going on that has to be tackled in prayer from the prayer room, not out on the streets.
Yeah,
where we think we can have an impact. Yeah, things change in the spiritual realm, and then things change on the street. And that is quite a common story around the world of missions, I think.
Yeah. Even you think you could go out almost treasure hunting, praying beforehand that God would help you to meet people, or maybe that he would give you a picture of somebody or some clothing. I remember doing that in some of the places, and you think, oh yeah, you're literally in the village where you want to meet these people, where the only place really that they live, and you could go out and still not even make a meaningful connection. The guy who owns the shop is away, and there's a non-local guy running it for him, and then the only people in that shop are actually some people who've moved from another area, and so they're not part of the people group and they're new. I remember that happening multiple times. Even going to this place it's not easy to really meet people and make a meaningful connection. It takes time and it takes prayer. And even if we had met someone, is that person the right person? Are they someone who's willing to invite us in, or are they just willing to have a conversation? So it really takes time and prayer for it to actually happen. You know, sometimes we think, oh, you just go there and it's going to work, but you're going to meet the people like literally in the one village they live in, and you still can't meet them sometimes.
Yeah, and I think there's a word there about consistency as well, and perseverance, even when you don't necessarily see things. So we were hoping to do 2 years in our city of language and cultural learning and then move out to one of these locations. So we would travel generally as a team, or different formations of our team, because we had quite a lot of families, that wasn't always possible for them, but roughly for a week, once every month, once every 6 weeks. So that was also quite an upheaval in our routine to do the traveling. It's a quite a big country, so these places would be at least a 7-hour drive away, 7 to 11 hours drive one way, and so it's a big commitment, but it's that slow building of reputation and relationship. And these people are very hospitable. So I think sometimes as Westerners, it's easy to just think, oh, great, well, there's an inn and like I can kind of take advantage of that. But learning for the respect to be truly mutual and to take the time to understand them rather than just lean on their generosity.
Yeah.
I think that's what consistency gives you, and they really start to see you and understand you. And in that, we became very good at very casually just sharing Bible stories, I guess name dropping different parables, or being like, oh, there's a story about that, have you heard this, and really working together as team in that. There's one like recent story that comes to mind of a teammate and I, actually our teammate that we mentioned that had the health issues, such a gifted and anointed evangelist, but because of her limitations in health hadn't been able to learn as much of the language as she'd like. And so she would just be able to weave these stories in, but would need somebody who spoke the language better to translate. And so when we were there together visiting, we could bounce off each other and I'd be able to translate, and she'd be like, oh, that makes me think of this, let's weave that in. And also inviting prayer into those spaces, so not just praying for these places like we've mentioned, but praying with people and seeing the spirit change in that moment as well. And sometimes it's just a focus on, you have a bad leg, like let's pray for that, which we definitely saw God move in, which is amazing, and can then open the door to people having greater curiosity, but also just to show that we're also people of prayer. They pray 5 times a day. We don't necessarily shout about it in the same way, but we are people of prayer. We are people who bring things back to God. We depend on God and we're submitted to him also.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, any other key stories, memories from those years that you had there?
Yeah, one again that relates to prayer. We had one of the people groups that we wanted to reach out to, that we tried to find them. They're like a traveling group. They didn't necessarily have a specific place, and so actually finding them in a place where the police wouldn't restrict your access was quite difficult. And so we had sort of a prayer day where we literally were like, God, where can we find these people? And we split off into various groups and followed various different things of where to go and find them and just go and ask people. And the outcome of one of those groups, I can't remember the specific thing that God spoke to us to lead it to, but through certain conversations, we found someone who said that they knew where they lived-ish. And so I got to go one day with a friend of mine who spoke very good Arabic to go and find this group. And I just remember praying the whole way, and we're like, we don't know what we're going to go and find, and we don't know what we're going to go and do, but it was one of those crazy adventures as well, because we took a tuk-tuk and I watched 2 crashes happen on the way, and then we checked with the tuk-tuk driver. He said he wouldn't go any further, and so we took a microbus after that, and we're just praying, God, please take us to the right place. The description we had was not even the name of an area. It was like, I think it's somewhere like under the bridge, and then you kind of go like past a house. It was like that, and so we were just going like, okay, we'll try. And then I think the microbus driver that we met was like a distant family member of some people from this people group. So he was like, okay, yeah, I know. And he sort of dropped us off in the right place. And again, we just prayed like, God, would you help us to meet the right people? And so we walked along, we passed a group of people, passed another group of people, and then there were some people sitting down, and my friend was like, we should go and sit down and chat to them. And so he went, sat down. I think we got a coffee with them, and he just started chatting. And it's difficult to ask about this people group because the name of their group is essentially a swear word. And that was the only way we knew to refer to them at that point. It was like, you
what
couldn't,
they're colloquially known as.
yeah, you couldn't say, oh, are you this? Because most people would be like, what? No, of course I'm not. Like, even if they were, you'd say, no, I'm not, because it means you're a robber, you're a thief, you're a prostitute. So it was like, we needed to have a conversation, and then eventually asked the guy who was sitting next to, and the guy was like very, very taken aback. But he eventually was like, I know some people who are, and then we kind of asked more and more, and then it turns out he was from this people group, and it was amazing. He then led us, we were kind of on the edge of a slum area, and then he led us in, which is the scariest experience I've ever had, because I would consider myself pretty good with directions and knowing where I went, but this was just, it was a genuine maze. It was like, I literally could not get out of here if I tried, even if I had a map.
Tall cement buildings, and everyone has their washing hanging over the windows.
Yeah, and your shoulders touch both walls.
And it's a dirt floor, and it's people everywhere, and lights and noises.
But we eventually went in, and we managed to meet one of the, I guess, like one of the uncles or one of the leaders that was very, very kind. We had some preliminary questions just to try and establish a relationship. And again, part of this reputation was probably earned. So we knew we weren't going to stay for a very long time, but we were just going to establish a connection, which we managed to do. I got offered by a random lady who wanted to kiss me as we walked past, but my language wasn't quite right. So I was like, she said something to me, and I sort of stopped and was like, what does that mean? And because I stopped, I was like in front of her. And then my friend turned around, grabbed my arm, pulled me forwards and goes, no, you don't want to kiss her, do you? But God just opened those opportunities, and it was like praying at each step of the journey. Okay, the tuk-tuk took us this far. Okay, God, what's next? And then it's like, okay, we're in this microbus. And then the microbus driver has an idea of where we need to go. And it's like, okay, it's not just us. Okay, he's leading to the right people. And then sitting down at the right group. You know, we passed a few group, but it's that, okay, here's the intuition, here's God's move, prompt for us. Okay, this is the right person. And that established a group that enabled sort of some continued possibilities for the team to meet people that were there. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Very good. Well, time is flying by. It's really interesting. It sounds like, you had some really varied experiences out there. But all this time, you're not feeling great still. Yeah. You're just pushing through your limitations. At some point, you realize we've got to go back and get some serious medical attention and just deal with this, right?
Yeah. So we were told that it was sinusitis at the time. So we were told by an Egyptian doctor that we'd probably just need to go back to the UK and get an operation done. And so we were like, okay.
Well, that was another moment as well where church back home, supporters back home were just amazing, because our sending church actually was going through a series on it seemed good to us in the spirit, from that phrase from Acts, just through the different moments that's shared. And they were kind of discussing it, and they knew about our situation, that we were praying and weighing up these things, and we were asking God. But honestly, the thought to us of returning to the UK for that made us feel so guilty. So we were like, we've only been here 2 years. Like, we can't leave. We can't give this up. We've hardly started to hack it. We don't want to be the people who turn back because things are too tough. We want to be committed and all in for this. And so there were two things we prayed for. We prayed that the doctor would recommend, if it was right, that we return for treatment in England, and that is what he said. And then at the same time, our church was going through this series, and I think about 3 of them, like in the week between Sundays, were just praying for us, and then felt reminded of that, and then came together and shared it on the Sunday. And it was a real life moment of it seemed good to the Spirit and to us. That was how it really felt to them. And then they were able to communicate that to us. And that was just like a breath of fresh air for us.
Yeah, just saying we think you should come back.
Yeah, and like the Lord had really impressed it on their hearts. And we were like, okay, well, it's out of our hands then.
Yeah.
And that is why why we so appreciate having a sending church taking responsibility of us in that way, because we get to defer to their discernment as well. So that was really impactful. And then we also received a word from somebody who didn't know us that said, or our situation, so our country is basically a desert, that said, I feel like you're in a desert, but often people refer to that as like a spiritual wilderness, but you're like, no, specifically, I feel like you're in a physical desert and God is taking you out and putting you into a green place
where you can rest and feel at home.
Yeah. So we were like, okay, Lord, this is quite clear. And so in the space of about 2 months, we were going from just going to pursue this here. And as Stephen mentioned, if I just have to be here so that I can thrive and I can share Jesus, then okay, like we'll do that, Lord, to suddenly being back in England.
Yeah, which we thought was going to be like a 3-month, get the operation, get out.
Then discovered it wasn't sinusitis, it was actually a head thing.
Yeah, and that it was actually the continuation of the concussion, which the sinusitis never felt right to us, but who were we to disagree with the doctors? Yeah, we kind of started to pursue that. I remember going to a consultant fairly soon when we got back. Someone paid for us to have a private appointment because it would have taken 2 years probably to get an appointment with a consultant. And yeah, they were like, oh, no, your sinus is very healthy. It's one of the most healthy I've ever seen, sort of thing. And it was like, he thought he was being lovely, but he was actually crushing us with this news, to be honest, because it just meant it was all going to be so much more complicated.
To square one.
Yeah. And the kind of other side to this is, I remember as we arrived back, we got a message asking us if we would ever consider helping with the sending side, and that there would be an opportunity for us if we did. And so, yeah, just the pairing of these things, honestly, even now it's really hard for us to hold that after our journeys, even compared to some people. It was a long journey for us to know we were called into global mission. We both felt pretty convicted by the time we were 13. Yeah. We went out at 22 and we came back after 2 years. Not what we'd expected at all, but also very clearly led by God.
And he's done a lot, I think, in our hearts of deconstructing having going on a pedestal, because the whole church is called to missions. It's a commandment from Jesus, but we understand that not everybody is in a position or is necessarily given an assignment to go overseas. So what is our involvement? And that's been what we've then wrestled with in the UK, and how he's just shown us that we can be, I mean, we'd still love to return overseas to one day when he opens that door, but yeah, we can still be involved in the sending, and that is just as much involved in God's mission as the going, and as needed, along with praying and giving and supporting and welcoming the nations here. It's all a part of God's mission, but we do need to step into his mission, whatever that looks like.
Definitely. And you guys have done an amazing job here with us. Yeah, you're natural mobilizers. You're journeying with so many young people, and it's been wonderful to see that in the past couple of years, and God using those gifts, even though it's not where you might have chosen to be. That echoes with my story too. I didn't know what this thing was, this mobilization and so on, but I loved it, and God had his reasons for bringing us out of Pakistan. It's reminding me of Dick Brogden a few episodes ago, who said our calling is actually to Jesus, and then to his mission and to his people, and to the lost wherever they are. And that doesn't change. The assignment changes, the location changes, but the calling, the mission, the heart, the worship, that doesn't. And so yes, you're in a different season at the moment. You're in this end of things. But what have been, just quickly, a couple of highlights from the last year or so, a couple of years here?
Yeah, I think one of the major highlights is just a journey with people who are in the process of trying to respond obediently to what God's doing. Like a lot of people have very special connections through fellowship, and I think a connection to the church, when you know somebody is chasing after God with everything that they have, and the honor of walking with each other in doing that, it's just amazing. And I think we get the chance to chat with so many people, young and old, who all they want to do is follow what God has for their life, and it's such an encouragement. You know what? The UK church is responding to God's call, and there are people who actively want to do what he's calling them to do, and I just feel so encouraged about that. And it's like, I am part of a great cloud of witnesses who are trying to respond obediently, and these are all real people as well. Like, real life gets in the way and makes it difficult. Some people get whacked on the head. These things happen, but to be able to walk with people is just amazing, because God does incredible things for each individual.
Yeah, I think for me it's reflecting on how normal we all are and how amazing the things that God does through us are. And we saw glimpses of God moving amazingly, and now being back here, I feel like we get to hear so many testimonies that come through, and also testimonies of people who are walking towards overseas full-time ministry. And everybody is just a normal person who God does something miraculous through, and usually have made plenty of mistakes along the way. And I just think, how incredible is it that, yes, it's important to do things like training, and yes, it's important to do vision trips and be aware and be wise. And also God chooses completely normal people, and then often people go through really tricky things, and they have to decide that Jesus is enough regardless, and they stay faithful to him. And yeah, he is himself. He is this incredible God, and the focus is on him. It's not necessarily about, I don't know, certain miraculous stories that happen, but people living these faith-filled lives that are laid down to Jesus genuinely. They're just normal people, and God loves it and God honors it, and you can just see that all over their lives. I love to see that. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, it is encouraging, isn't it? we meet a lot of students, don't we? A lot of young people in their 20s. Their life is before them. Anything. They've got skills, they've got jobs, opportunities sometimes. But yeah, to see them saying, okay, Lord, wherever, whatever, however, I'm in. I'm all in, and that's wonderful. And so just to see people getting on the aeroplanes and heading off to Southeast Asia and the city centres out there, or into the Gulf, or to go and work in the deserts of Africa and so on, and know they're with unreached peoples, and just to be a little part of the story that God's got them on, and they may face suffering. Their witness may be their suffering in front of the nations. That's a very John Piper thing, isn't it? Taken out of Philippians, displaying the sufferings of Christ before the nations is part of the mission of God. So your story ties into that, and who knows what some of these young people are going to face as we're sending them out, but it is a joy and a privilege to see what God is up to in the UK church and beyond, all over the world. Very cool. Great, guys, it's been so good to have you today. Stephen, I feel there's one funny story you were telling me earlier about language mistake. Give us that one to end off with.
Sure, yeah. It was actually, I mentioned an amazing dinner which felt like a culture-changing moment for us before my head injury. It was actually there. I was chatting to a guy and I found out he was a plumber kind of through the very broken language that I had at the time. And I knew that we had a broken toilet, and so I was like, how can I stay in contact with this guy? I was like, maybe I can get him to come and look at the broken toilet. And so like my brain kind of slowly worked it out. I was going, so I said Anna, which means like I'm, and I was trying to say my, and then I was like thinking again, I was like, I need to say toilet, say hamam. So I said Anna hamam, and that just means I'm a toilet. And the amazing thing is that across the room, our teammate who had much better language was absolutely wetting herself laughing at me, whereas this guy who I was trying to talk to, who I just told him I was a toilet, was looking at me so longingly, desperate to hear what I was going to say. He gave me complete kindness, whereas my supportive teammates, was laughing and wetting herself at me. Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, we've all been there. We've got our fair share of big mistakes on the field, whether light-hearted or otherwise. Well, thanks, guys. It's been a joy to be with you this afternoon, and great that you're on our team here. We love having you around, but thanks for sharing your stories, and especially the hard stuff today.
It's great. Thank you for
having us.
All right. God bless.
Thanks so much for joining us today, guys. If you want to get in touch, you can email me personally, matt@frontiers.org.uk. And here's a great quote to end with from David Livingstone. God only had one son, and he made that son a missionary. Have a great week, and make sure you don't miss our next episode.